Well, hi everybody. Hope you're having a good morning, afternoon, evening, sleep. If you're going to watch the recording, whatever it is, wherever you are, I hope you're having a good day. Okay, so today's AMAP is I'm going to talk about leg length discrepancies in Pilates. Right? So if somebody comes in and says, I have a shorter leg, one of the things to think about, hi Alexandra, one of the things to think about is who told them that? How do they know it's a shorter leg? And where's it shorter? Right? Because, and how short is it? Right? Is it a little bit? Is it a lot? There's differences. And it can be caused from a number of different issues. And the only way to really know if somebody has a true leg length difference is pretty much through an x-ray, and where you take an x-ray and you can measure the bones and literally see that there is a difference in the length of the bone from one side to the other. You can have a discrepancy, right? And that can come from a number of different issues as well besides the bone length, right? And so the other question is, which one's long or which one's short? Right? So here, think of it this way. Here's my two hands, right? So this is, relative balance. So if it does this, right? Look at the difference, right? So I'm going to do it this way. So I go like this, right? So now we say, all right, this is longer, right? But if I do this still appears longer, but this one's shorter. So is one really too long, or is it really one that's too short? And what's the difference, and what's the cause, right? So there's a number of ways you can have that, right? You can have, if you have a rotation, right, in your pelvis, a little bit in your spine, and guess what? If you have scoliosis, what do you have? Scoliosis is really a rotoscoliosis, so there's a side bending and a rotation. And when you put that into the spine, guess what? One hip hikes up and the other one goes down. So again, is the length discrepancy in the leg, or is it in the torso, in the powerhouse? And is it in the upper powerhouse, the lower powerhouse? Is it both? Do you have an S curve and one's more prominent than the other? There's all these variables that can be, part of that issue. So the question becomes, what do you do when you're a Pilates teacher? How do you address that? Well, what can't you change, right, in a Pilates session? What you can't change is the bones, right? You can't put somebody down and go, oh, well, I'm going to lengthen that bone, or I'm going to shorten that bone, or I'm going to untwist that bone, or I'm going to unside bend. It doesn't work that way. The bone is a fairly static structure that it can change, right? Because it's alive, and it has some mobility and flexibility in it, right? It has the ability to deviate. It's kind of like if you think of a skyscraper, right? The skyscraper moves in the wind. It's not totally static. It has some give to it. Well, the bones have some give to it. And matter of fact, when you fracture a bone, sometimes they call it a green stick fracture, because it doesn't snap in half. It cracks like if you break a branch off a tree in the springtime when it's growing, or in the summer. It doesn't snap right off. It basically breaks, and there's a piece still left, right? So that's what can happen. So that it has some mobility to it. So, but in a Pilates session, you're not changing the bone. It's just not going to happen. So, and I always teach, the best balance within the imbalance, right? So, what do you do? If you start to look at the apparatus is square, right? If you look at the reformer, it's not in weird shapes. It's very square, right? And that squareness and the Cadillac, most mats, the chairs, the barrels, everything's, set. It's got the distance and all these things, and you lie somebody on it, and you can see if somebody's, out of alignment within that square. So what do? We put them the best alignment within the, and Romana talked about the box. So, you put everybody and you get the box within the box, right? Not outside of the box. This is where you get to stay in the box. So you put the box within the box, which is the squareness of the apparatus, as best you can. Because if somebody does have a bony difference, anomaly, variation, leg length, spinal twist, whatever it is, and it's in the bone, and you try to make them fit that anatomical, balanced body that you see in the textbooks today, you're going to cause stress and strain because you're taking them out of what their structural functional ability is and trying to put it into something that it's not. And when you do that, you're going to cause a strain in the tissues, and you're trying to retrain that. And you can retrain that, right? You can train somebody to do the wrong thing. Happens all the time, right? We can, the nervous system and our bodies allow us to do a lot of things that aren't necessarily the most beneficial. Okay, and if you make the muscle do the job of what the bone's supposed to do, and you make it a habituated thing, then you have stress and strain and fatigue and problems. So you don't want to, overdo that. So you have to find that best balance. Then, you have to look, because if I change the pelvis, does it change the leg? And a lot of times it does. So if I reset and reteach, I can get, and that leg length may change. But then again, is it too long or is it too short? And that's what you'll be able to do by looking at the pelvis, the spine, the ribs, those types of things, and sort of get that best alignment. And and when I do the teacher training and I do a lot of my workshops, I do the hands-on and show you sort of how to do those things. I can't really do that here. But that's one of the ways that, one of the things that you can do. There's ways to sort of figure that out. But the easiest way to do when you don't have that training, right, is to look at, the box within the box, get the best alignment without stress and strain, and then see where things are, and then start to do that. Now, if somebody does have a true leg length discrepancy, difference, or even if it's in the spine and it's a twist and they have and it causes a leg length discrepancy, right? Because it's an interconnected chain. You can't change one part without changing the other, and just like, and that's Joe's understanding, right? Because it's really about strengthening, everything. So if we're strengthening everything at the same time, all the muscles are working. They're just working differently, and they're always shifting and changing in relationship to the gravitational forces and where we are in space. And with Joe's, where the springs are, the amount of springs, all those variables are always happening. And when you do that, then you have the ability to do what? You start to be able to strengthen in the way that's going to be the most, relative balance is because I always like to say balance is a fallacy, because it is as well, because our nervous systems don't allow us to ever really have balance, because are you right or left-handed? And even if you're ambidextrous, you do more on one side than the other. You may still be able to use both hands, but you're still usually more dominant on one or the other. Okay, and if you're dominant on your right hand, you're dominant on your left leg, and vice versa. So they have all those variables. So what do we do? Well, if somebody comes to you and they're 60 years old or 50, almost any age, right? But especially the older you are, well, if they've had a leg length discrepancy and it's a structural discrepancy, they've had that for how long, right? 40, 50, maybe since they were born, right? Maybe it's genetic. Could have been, a cause. There's a number of different causes for these types of things, so I'm not even going to get into that here. So if they've had that for 50 years and all of a sudden you try to fix it, right? And they've habituated to that. If they don't have a problem and you try to fix it, you may also create a problem. So it's not always about, let me, make you even. It's, again, you can maybe if they're but now if they're having an issue and they're having pain, that is something, or discomfort, or a lack of function, or a lack of mobility, or a lack of strength, right? Then you can address it that way and start to look at how to maybe add some padding. Because Joe had lots of pads in his studio, and Ramana did, and I do, and most classical or people who are trying to do what Joe taught have pads, because you can use those, and you use them for a number of different reasons. It's not always that bony discrepancy that you use a pad for. Sometimes you use a pad because they need more padding, because if you have apparatus that's like Joe's, there's very little padding on that apparatus. Very little, nowadays you have these foot bars with all this extra pad. You have the carriage that has all this extra padding. And when you do that, you take away the dynamic of the proprioceptive, the kinesthetic feedback that you get with little padding, right? And so you have to change the relationship between mobility and strengthening, right? That has to happen when you're exercising Joe's way. So, and he had it in a way that's with the spring settings and the exercise, it was relatively balanced between that mobility and that stability. And when you add the padding, you skew that. So you're not going to get the same results. Remember, if you change the exercise, you change what it does to the body. If you change the apparatus that you exercise on, it's going to change what it does to the body as well. So if you change the padding, it changes the exercises, it changes what it does to the body. So things to think about. So if you have that and you've set everybody, and one of the things, right, what do? You try to find that best balance for the head, for the shoulders, for the pelvis. All right, now let's look at where the feet are, compared to when they just lie down and they put their foot on there, which is what their habit is, right? People lie down with their habits. And we're about changing habits, because there's good and bad habits. And Pilates, I think, my understanding of it is it changes for the better, right? It's better. It doesn't teach you ways that are detrimental, right? It's an understanding of the mechanics of the body. Joe understood that very well, and how the body worked and how the muscle system works, right? The muscle organs work, and they work as not one, but as a unit, one whole unit. Everything works together, and it's always been a system. And that's nothing new. I mean, Joe's system is that's what it was. When you exercise, you put everything together. So when you look at those imbalances, you're trying to do that. And if somebody then needs a pad because you've organized everything and there's still a discrepancy and there's a discomfort or a strain, and remember, if you do something in the foot, it doesn't just happen at the ankle or in the foot or in the knee or in the hip. Goes into the pelvis, goes into the spine, goes into the rib cage, goes into the opposite shoulder, which is the opposite hand, and then you can twist the spine and it can twist the head. So there's all these variables that we want to be able to look at. And again, you should be getting that in your training. I'm not going to spend a lot of time here trying to teach you how to do that, because that's foundational, right? That's a foundational thing that you should start to be doing. But if that's the case and somebody does have pain, well, then you can pad it. And a lot of times, if it's a painful issue and you pad it properly and you then allow them to exercise without the pain, then that starts to reset the patterning. And as the patterning starts to change over time, then it should improve, and then you should be able to get less and less and less padding. Right? But at the same time, let's talk about footwork. Why did Joe pad the bar? Why do we want to pad the bar? Well, for some people, as we get older, right, the fat pad in your foot, especially because if they sit around a lot, right, retired people don't always work as much, don't get up and walk around. I mean, all these things. What happens to your fat pad? You don't use it, you lose it, right? So it starts to decrease. So if you have somebody where they put their foot on the bar and it's painful, then you have to modify and you have to adjust for that. And that could be padding. And again, if somebody's foot hurts every time they take a step, then they may be twisting away from that, right? So now when they lie down, they're twisted and it looks like, oh, your leg is shorter. But it's shorter because they've had pain in the foot from walking, or in the ankle, or in the knee somewhere. And so what do? They compensate and they twist away from the pain. So they can still walk, but it's uncomfortable, so they modify and adjust. So is that shortness related to the leg? Is it a true discrepancy? And again, without an X-ray, you can't really know that for sure. And that's when somebody comes in and says, or they say, I was told I have a leg length discrepancy. Ask the question, did you get an X-ray? If they haven't had an X-ray, then that could be almost anything. And there's lots of ways that you can reset that without having to have padding. depending on how you use the alignment in the box within the box, and trying to figure those things out. Okay, so a couple things to think about. All right, so that's kind of it for today. If you like this, then please tell your friends and your other Pilates aficionados and teachers and everybody else. Almost every Friday when I'm teaching, I don't always do it. So next Friday I will be doing participating in teacher training in Rhinebeck, New York. So I will not be doing AMAT. I don't think. If we have lunch, maybe I will, but we'll see. But if I'm not here, don't be surprised. Okay, a couple other things. I finished my Understanding Joe's Contrology last Sunday. It was very successful. I think it went very well. In April 6th and 13th, I will be doing Breathing Joe's Way, another webinar sequence series. And if you're interested in that, I did the workshop at Pilates at the Pillow last year. And I look at the anatomy and the understanding and the development of how we evolve in our musculature and our skeletal system and our movement abilities, and understanding that, and then looking at what Joe, how he taught, why he taught, how did he teach breathing, and the understanding of that in relationship to gravity, to spring resistance, a lot of different things. So if you want to have a better understanding of the exercises you teach and the breathing that you should be doing for those exercises, because almost every exercise, the breathing is a little different. And so something to think about. And sometimes the length is different between inhale and the exhale, all these variables. And Joe understood that, because there is not one way to breathe for every exercise. That's not how Joe worked, because that's not life. And Joe really taught us how to understand function and movement with his system for life and dealing with what life throws at us. So a lot of times you have to be in weird positions and different things with the push and pull that we have to do in all the things we do in life. And you have to be able to breathe while you're doing that. And sometimes it's longer or shorter, and sometimes you hold your breath, a little bit of everything. So if that's something you're interested in, you want to find out more and have a better understanding of how to teach your clients to breathe, because Joe thought it was very important. And then on Tuesdays, I have my Balanceology class, which is not Pilates. It's about, if you're interested and you're having issues with balance and you want to strengthen your balance, it's a great class to do that. The recording's good for a week, so you can practice afterwards. And then after that, I have an arm springs, leg springs class that I do. It's a little advanced, but you don't need a resistor. And we use the exercise from the resistor poster and some of the other ones from the archives. So you're able to, join me. You'll get arm springs and leg springs, a very good workout, and that's from 1 to 1:30. And then next week is my last class for the control optics. I had a 6-week series of looking at using Joe's eye chart and some other aspects from Feldenkrais and PT and biomechanics for the eyes and things like that to look at how to use the eyes in relationship to the exercises and what we do in the work that we do, and how the eyes drive a lot of things. Because we know, since I'm teaching breathing, one of Joe's quotes is, it's the first thing and it's the last thing in life, right? But in reality, in the womb, the eyes start moving before you start breathing. So the eyes are what really start movement first, okay? But the breath is not far behind. All right, so that's what I'm doing. So, and then I'm trying to think. We have some other webinars coming up with Elaine and I. So watch the social media and you'll see it coming up soon. So join us, and I'll look forward to seeing you all then. All right, thanks everybody. Thanks for joining.